Hey guys. I purposely told them not to introduce me. I kind of talk about who I am coming up, and you know, that stuff's a little flowery for me sometimes. I love my job. I love to get to talk to you guys. I've done this for several years now. I got blown up in 2009. You'll hear about that coming up. But even the stories that I get to hear, whether they're happy or sad, you know, I've heard a few stories today already that have been happy. You know, we got survivors and people that can live to, you know, tell it another day. Sometimes I got to take taxis. So I got to tell this story because it's pretty funny. So, you know, as you can expect, taxi drivers have some pretty good stories. And so I get in this taxi and this taxi driver's telling me about this fantasy he has about kissing a nun, right? And I'm like, hey, I'm not judging, whatever, man, if that's what you want to do. And he said, I was driving around last October downtown, and this nun got in the back of my taxi. And once the nun told him where the nun wanted to go, they started driving, and he got so nervous and fidgety and anxious. And he said, listen, I've got to confess that I've had this fantasy to kiss a nun. And so the nun pauses and says, are you married? And the guy says, no, I'm not married. And that says, okay, we'll just pull off behind that building over there. And after about a 10-minute deep mouth kiss, they get back on the road, and he starts feeling guilty. And he says, I've got to confess something else. I actually am married. And the nut says, that's okay. My name's Dennis, and I'm going to a costume party. Come on. A couple things I wanted to touch on. I wanted to add on to what you guys were talking about earlier. So this is amazing. What you guys do here, a lot of companies don't. I go around the country nonstop and do this kind of stuff. And there's not a lot of companies that take the time and the resources, which is money, right? It's a great cost to do this and bring you guys in and do this. And so I appreciate that about you guys. It's unique. You should know that. So I wanted to give you this graphic because you guys were talking about boundaries. And when I do 70E training, the most important thing I try to beat into your heads is barricades, boundaries, right? And I just wanted to reiterate, your restricted and your limited approach are your shock boundaries. They are fixed based on voltage. For most of you, that's probably going to be 480, right? So that's a 42-inch and a 12-inch barricade, a boundary. Those aren't going to change. Like you said earlier, the arc flash boundary does change. One thing you need to understand is that you are never, ever, ever, ever going to set your physical barricade less than the limited approach boundary, right? Never. But you are always, 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 always going to take the greater of these two boundaries to set up your physical barricade. That is really important. If your arc flash boundary is 60 inches and your limited approach is 42, and you have an arc flash and your barricade's here, you're going to kill somebody. That's really important to get that right. The restricted approach boundary is for you as qualified individuals, if you are qualified. The limited is for other knuckleheads, so they can't reach in and touch what you're working on. Those are for unqualified. Obviously, the arc flash boundary is the arc flash boundary. Also, I wanted to add on the labels. Really important. This is right out of 70E. Labels have to have some information on it. They have to have the system voltage, right? That's for your shock PPE. Your gloves, you got to know what voltage it is. That's how you size your PPE. You also have to have your arc flash boundary. We've already talked about that. I'm going to talk about that again because that's a place where you get burned. Number 3, you've got to have one of these, and this is for your arc flash PPE. You got to have the incident energy at the distance, like 20 cals at 18 inches. 18 inches is typical. Minimum arc rating of clothing, which is what a lot of companies I deal with do. The site-specific level of PPE, like you guys, the 40 cal suits. I work with a lot of contractors that say, look, I don't care if it's 1.2 or 39.9, you're going to wear a 40 cal suit. Now, each his own. I think that's hard to do sometimes when it's July, like you were talking about earlier, when it's super hot out there. All right, so what gives me the right to talk to you guys today? What brings me in here? So I'm the lead safety and technical trainer for Tyndale. Tyndale, if you didn't know, is a PPE manufacturer and distributor, right? We outfit about 95% of the investor-owned utilities in the country. We are heavily involved with all the different organizations, whether it's union or non-union, in protecting individuals like you. That's why I moved over to Tyndale, because they have such a great mission, vision, passion. I am a CESCP, Certified Electrical Safety Compliance Professional. I've been training the 70 professionally for several years now. Master Electrician for over 28 years. In construction for over 35. So I know what you guys do. I've worked on projects from $0 to $2 billion, right? I've worked in VDC BIM with pre-construction, estimation, you name it, project management. There's not an aspect in the industry that any of you work in that I haven't done for a little bit. Obviously OSHA trained, and I'm an arc flash survivor. That's the reason I'm here. The first 5 of those points are my vocation, my profession. The last one is my mission, vision, passion. So I stumbled across this Venn diagram, that's what they call these things, a while back, and it kind of sums it up. This gives you your passion, your mission, your vocation, your profession. Well, you can just show up for work every day and meet 2 of those, right? The world needs what you do, right? And you get paid for it. So you don't even have to do anything special, you know, to fill out 2 of those. But you got to ask yourself, do you love what you do and are you good at it? If you're not good at it, what are you doing here? If you don't love it, what are you doing here, right? Go do something you love. If you don't love what you do and you're not good at it, you are a danger to yourself and somebody else. And you need to reevaluate your life choices, right? Not saying school, but you need to invest yourself in what you do. There is some graphic content in here. I put this presentation together, obviously. I don't know why I'm so shaky, man. I still get nervous. I've been doing this for years and I still get nervous up here. I don't put stuff in there to be all nasty and shocky, but there is real content in there. So you've been warned. So I only have a little bit of time, so I'm going to go a couple points. I'm going to give you a short case study of my accident, and I'm going to tell you what I thought caused it. So we're going to start with the human consequences. So you guys have probably heard this ad nauseum about arc flash. So when an arc flash happens, we kind of touch a little bit on time, right? Arc flash is all about time. Breakers trip in fractions of cycles. All right, that's a sine wave, goes up and down every 60 times every second. Every time that goes up and down, there's an explosion and an implosion for arc flash. So when my arc flash happened, it was probably an 1/8 of a second. I'm guessing it was about 6 or 7 cycles. In that instant, molten metal was just vaporized, right? So molten metal varies from 1300 to 2500 degrees. Clothing will ignite between 4 and 6, 4 and 8, depending on the clothing type. Right, so you have that pressure wave, 600 to 800 miles per hour coming at you, sound waves, shrapnel, you got that intense light, can cause some welder's eye. But the copper vapor and the hot air expansion is what kills a lot of people. You breathe in, you burn your lungs, you can't transmit that oxygen to your bloodstream. They can literally put full oxygen on you, 100%, and watch your pulse ox drop. And unless they can crack your chest and put you on a heart-lung machine to give you oxygenated blood, you're going to die. You're going to fade out and die. There's no way they can crack your chest in 5 minutes to give you the oxygen that you need to survive. 35,000 degrees, 3.5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. So it is hot. Those burn injuries, anything over 50%, your survival rate goes way down, right? There are some people I know that have been burnt more than 50%, but most I don't because they're not alive, right? You die from the infection and other complications. So this is a fire department video. This is actual video for my accident. From Overland Park Fire Department. They come out when they respond to a call and triage and all that. They record, and then at the end of the week, they review the accidents and the stuff they've responded to as training. $122.08. Kind of smashes the misconception that 120 will sustain an arc enough to hurt you. It will. No gloves, that's my skin. Honestly, those guys shouldn't even have been in that room because that equipment was severely compromised and someone flipped the main back on. It's a miracle it didn't blow up again. Now, I thought I was going to be good. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. I thought maybe a month off work, I'd be back in the saddle again. Hotel, obviously. I'll pass that watch around a little bit later. You can take a look at it. So that resulted in my coma week. I didn't think it was that bad. I was laughing and joking with the firefighters and the doctors as they cut my pants off and gave me some Daisy Dukes in the emergency room. It was awkward, and I was joking about it. But then they put me out, right? That's when they debride you. They scratch all that dead skin off. And, you know, most people are asleep for that. Some people talk about being awake for that process. When it's a bad burn, they typically just put you out and try to stabilize you. You could see where they took the skin off my legs to repair my hands. My face and head were a deep second-degree burn. We'll kind of talk about that in a second. And then my hands on the backs were a deep third degree. It burned my veins out. And then second degree on my palms. Most common injury, by the way. No, I was not high at all in that left-hand picture. But you can see the burn where at the top of my head and where my beard wasn't as burned, but it pretty much eliminated all the layers of skin before that, and then that's before they took that bandage off. I did have bits of metal stuck in my skin, and when they woke me up a week later, I blew my nose and had about a BB-sized piece of copper. It looked like a kinder, gentler kidney stone that was stuck up in my sinuses. That copper had blown up in my nose. So a few minutes later, that's what it looked like. Again, no gloves, no PPE whatsoever, right? That's what a third-degree burn looks like. After they scrub it, that's a few hours later. That's what it looks like after they scrub a third-degree burn. Now, it doesn't look black. It's bad. That skin will not heal on its own. They have to go back in and do a skin graft, which when I woke up is what I had. That's a few days later. I woke up to them pulling about 100 staples out of my hands, and that's what I woke up to. Now, I cannot express to you enough. I'd like to think I'm a pretty strong individual. Again, been in construction for 35 years. I'm not that sensitive about stuff. I can't tell you the emotional, mental, physical trauma waking up and not being able to move your hands. Hands and face are the most common injury for arc flash because you're going to be wearing your stuff and you're going to have those big heavy gloves on trying to do some fine work, and you're going to be like, damn it, I can't do this. And you take your glove off. It's only going to take me a second. You create an arc flash. Now your hands are smoked, right? My hands took a long time to get back to where they could move. A few months later, that's what it looked like. 5 months of intense hand therapy. This accident pretty much ended my hand modeling career. I don't know if there's any Seinfeld fans in the room. I was like George Costanza before he grabbed that iron, if you're any Seinfeld geeks. You can clearly see where my watch was. And then years later, that's what it looks like. That watch tattoo is in that circle that in that previous picture has the time of my accident. Good conversation piece. I can't feel heat or cold on the backs of my hand. I can feel pressure, you know, and that, but I can't feel heat or cold. When it gets really cold, my fingers ache. You know, arthritis is kicking in because it's stiff. It will do a lifelong damage to your hands that you're going to be dealing with. It burned a lot of skin off the end of my finger, about an 1/8 inch, so it's right on the bone there. So I got to be careful not to jam my fingers. And since my fingernails don't come to the end of my fingers, I can't pick up any money on the ground with this hand. Your fingernails, you need them to pick things up. So I talked about that watch. This watch worked great, even after the arc flash. I could cover it and hit the light and it worked. So I got this bright idea while I was sitting at home for 7 months. I was going to send these pictures in the story into Timex. Because it takes a licking, keeps on ticking, right? I don't think of any better example here. Man, they didn't even respond to me. I thought I was going to be the next Timex spokesman or something, or, they didn't even send me a watch or anything, but I'm not bitter. That spot right there on the back, that's molten copper. So here I am wearing this watch, right? I'm inside that gear. I create this arc flash. It happens in about 1/8 of a second. It vaporizes the copper inside that gear, pushes it underneath my watch, and brazes itself to cold stainless steel in an instant, right? If any of you have done any welding, soldering, brazing, any of that stuff, you know you got to get your surface temp hot before that other metal will stick. And dissimilar metals complicate that even more. So that you can't scratch that off. I'll pass this around, you guys. I've lost the band, but here. I'll drop it. Now, what was I doing? I had to put a 200 amp breaker in some A-series GE gear. 2500 amp, 12208. So when that GE comes from the factory, that gear comes from the factory, and it's a space, not a spare, this tape is wrapped all the way to the end of the bus bars, which used to come out to about here, as you probably know. So you can't just bolt a breaker out onto tape. So I leaned in nice and close with my metal utility knife, and I started cutting the tape off that bus bar, right? About halfway through that process, I called my boss and I said, man, this is precarious. We probably ought to shut this off. And after a short discussion, my boss pretty much said, be careful, right? Now, I'll get into more of that later. Now, this was a stupid choice, but that's the level of complacency I reached. I'll talk about dominoes later. Everybody's got a row of dominoes. Every time you make a stupid choice, you flip one of those dominoes. This would have been the second to the last of my dominoes. I actually got through that process. Got those bus bars cleaned off as you see them. But you see B phase is down too low. It was actually up high near A phase. That gap was really thin. And the sides of the breaker right here would not fit in between there because you got to have those slid in there. So I thought to myself, I need to move this B phase down some. What can I use? You can't just stick a screwdriver in there. That'd be stupid. So I thought, well, I got a wooden carpenter's pencil. Maybe that'd work. It's got graphite in it, man. That might blow up. So even in my stupidity, because it wasn't ignorance, even in my stupidity, I knew the hazard. I was still trying to figure out a way not to blow myself up. So I thought, oh, man, I got some fiberglass fuse pullers. Those are made to go into that restricted area, that restricted space, pull hot fuses, fiberglass. I reached back, grabbed them, was going to put the narrow into there and twist it and move that bar down. Not even for 2 seconds did I realize there was a metal rivet in there. So when I got them up to that little knob right there, you see a little indentation, that's what started the arc flash. And then it grew to all 3 phases, as it always does in that situation, and it exploded. Now, you might be saying, that guy's an idiot. Well, that's true, I was. And that you'd never do that, nobody else either would. But here's an OSHA log. All right, here's an OSHA log. This guy right here, employee number 1 used a screwdriver to scrape away tape adhesive on the gear. An arc flash happened. Except this guy died 3 weeks later from his injuries. So I could tell you with all these that I've done and the stories that I've heard of some stupid things. People getting into several thousand amp gear, 3,000 to 6,000 amp gear, no PPE. They just got to reach in and get something quick. There's stuff like this goes on all the time. That's my fuse puller right there. For some reason, somebody swiped that and they never did give it back to me. It was a little irritating. I would have loved to have that as a souvenir as well. Across the room about 10 feet, were pieces of my clothing that had melted to those water bottles, cold water bottle. So I was not wearing any PPE. I like to call that fuel. And a lot of that blew off. Now, there's a lot of miracles that kept me alive. Several. I'll talk about one at the end. One of the miracles is my clothing didn't catch on fire. It absolutely should have caught on fire without a shadow of a doubt. Another miracle is I left the dead front on. It would have been a lot easier to pull the 4 bolts and pull that whole dead front off instead of those little finicky screws, to pull those 3 covers off. I pulled the above and below and the one on the top of what I was working on because I thought that might be safer. It turns out it was. You can see how much heat and fire blew up about my face level where I was. Had I taken that cover off, it would have killed me. Minimally, it would have burned my face off. You've got 3 options in life when you burn your face off. Number 1, you can travel the country and go do an inspirational power tour with the Oprah Winfrey Show and inspire millions to survive and be better. Option 2 is what most people take, and that's that you're going to kill yourself. It is mentally and emotionally traumatic, just like soldiers that get injured and lose limbs or have catastrophic facial injuries. You are depressed. Not only do you live through that, but your family lives through that. They have to deal with your drama. You're going to be a drama queen. If you get your face melted off, you're going to be a depressed mess, right? And oftentimes that family will leave that individual because they can't handle that either. Third option, if you're a strong individual and you've got a strong family unit around you, you're going to become a shut-in. They were telling me, I was in a small town, they were telling me about a guy in that town who pretty much had his face removed from a phosphorus bomb in Vietnam. The guy would only come out at night. The whole town murmured. He'd wear a hoodie. It was horrible. right? Nobody wants to sit in the house and watch Netflix for the rest of your life. Nobody wants to see your burnt head like that, and you don't want anybody to see you. So it's going to be a miserable existence. You've got to put on your PPE every time. Don't make exceptions. So what are the physical consequences? I was in a coma for a week, right? Burn unit for 2 weeks. And by the way, it's not uncommon that they put you in a coma because they don't know the level of damage to your lungs. And they literally told my family, because what's the first thing your family's going to say when they get to the hospital? Is he going to be all right? Right? The doctors literally told my family, we don't know, right? We don't know, because they don't. It takes a few days for your body to kind of stabilize. How many stories have you heard about, a soldier might get shot 10 times and lays in a ditch for a week and they find him and he survives, or somebody gets a paper cut and dies from staph or something and you're like, what? Right? So the human body's kind of strange that way. So I was in the burn unit for 2 weeks. I couldn't drive for 2 months. Now, it's not just not being able to drive to your doctor's appointments, to your hand therapy appointments, all that stuff. I also had to have them button my shirt and my pants. I had to have people wipe my butt for me because you can't use your hands, right? It's a miserable, embarrassing existence when you don't have the use of your hands. Of course, after a number of years, I'm going to say, people can do anything, without the use of their hands. I don't want to be that person. Compression gloves for over a year. Was it Tyler? That has his gloves. I mean, I hated wearing those things, man. I walk in a restaurant, people go, what kind of leprosy does that guy have? I had to wear those for a little over a year. Loss of function and feeling, we talked about that a little bit. Now, this is the deeper thing. Let's talk about the mental and emotional consequences of arc flash. Most people that suffer from any traumatic injury, arc flash, are going to suffer from ASD. That's acute stress disorder. That's a month or 2 months, right, with anxiety and stress. I was watching a movie when I got home. It was a 70s movie, cruise ship movie thing where these terrorists planted these bombs over this cruise ship. And this guy was trying to disarm one of these bombs, and he's in there real close like I was, and got his tools, and he's in there, and he trips a thing, and it blows up in his face. And I remember this wave of anxiety coming over me and thinking to myself, man, that must be what PTSD was, because I didn't understand ASD. ASD usually goes away after a couple months, but PTSD, it kicks in after that, and that can last a lifetime. We blow stuff up out of Chemo Labs in Philly. We do arc flashes for companies like you. We invite people in to view them. We test PPE on real live arc flashes from around 2 cals to about 30, right? And you don't have any clue, like you all have seen videos, I'm sure most of you have. You really don't understand until you're standing in front of that thing and you can feel the blast, feel the heat from the blast. It hurts your ears, it blinds you. It's unbelievable, right? So we're out there blowing stuff up, and there's this lineman, and this is a big old boy, big old black guy, Rodney. He's a lineman. 20 years ago, about the same time frame as me, was working up on a line. It was cold, and he put his hoodie on. It's non-FR, it wasn't ARFR, and it blew up, caught on fire, and burned him pretty good, right? So that was about 20 years ago. So he's there because him and I are kind of speaking at this event, and him and I are standing there, and we blow one up. And you can just see him, man. His whole countenance changes, right? He's just starting to get real anxious and nervous. And then we blow another one up. He has to go inside the building. We blow another one up. He has to go inside an inside room. That's PTSD. That can stick with you forever. That can boot you out of what you know as far as your profession, right? It may kick you right out of being an electrician and find a new line of work. Coworker stressed and worried, right? I don't care if you don't like the person, if you work with them, if someone dies at work, it's going to affect all of you. You're all going to feel that. Obviously, my family was traumatized. My kids were 4 and 6 at the time. That was right before my accident and right after. I mean, it's what we do it for, right? Whatever your family is, if it's a fur baby or whatever, but most of us have family, moms, dads, whatever, kids. My kids didn't understand. You're not there to protect your family. I was in the hospital, and my wife called and said, the furnace isn't working. This is about a week and a half in. And I said, well, obviously I can fix anything. I said, I obviously can't fix it right now. And so the HVAC guy was happy to come over and for $300 install an $11 igniter on our gas furnace. That pissed me off, right? I wasn't there to take care of my castle. That's the kind of stuff you're going to deal with. I had a daddy-daughter dance probably 2 or 3 weeks after I got blown up, and I couldn't drive. I had to hire my dad to drive us, which is embarrassing, and compression gloves and still look like a lobster head. So it's going to affect you greatly. So what was I working on? I kind of touched on, this is just a rudimentary drawing. 500 kVA transformer literally right outside the door, you know, probably 10, 15 feet, 4-section piece of gear. You got your CT tap section, your 2500 fused main section, and then a couple branch sections. Super common gear in the industry, nothing you haven't seen before. Looks like that, right? Looks like every gear in every place. You can see the piece I was working in, that third over. Right outside the door there was a transformer about 5 feet outside that door. There's another look there at the dead front with the dead front on, and then another picture of how much copper was removed by that. So the gear is pretty common, right? 12208. One thing you need to understand, you guys kind of touched on it earlier. Generally, electricians are like, man, I'm not opening that 480 panel. I'm just going to blow up on me. I don't want to get in there, right? But then they'll go cavalierly open a 120 panel because it's just 120, right? It's just 120. It's not going to kill you. But the reality is, most cases, when we do incident energy studies, that 480 panel won't even require arc flash PPE to get into. It's below 1.2 calories. And the 12208 panel is often Cat 2, face shield, safety glasses, earplugs, balaclava, shirt, pants, etc. Right? So the 480 panel will kill you faster from shock just because of how it works. But the low voltage panels typically will be a higher incident energy. So what are the non-human consequences? The people in the office are worried about this, but here, like I said, I'm really impressed that the office here really does care about your safety. There's a lot of places, especially I talk to a lot of maintenance staff, that in a big company, here's a group of maintenance guys, they don't care, right? They just they want the plant running at any cost. But your non-human consequences, mine was a $220,000 hospital bill. $65,000 in OSHA fines and citations, $15,000 from the GE repair team that had to come back out, or had to come out and re-UL list that equipment. We couldn't get it out the door, and they wanted it done a little bit more expeditiously. Gear was hard to get, so they came out. They were happy to come out for 15 grand and do that for us. The installing contractor, whoever put that gear in, put it out of order. GE got out there and they said, this isn't even installed correctly. Nothing's torqued. In that previous picture, I'll show you. The electrician did not run enough sets. There's supposed to be 7 sets. They ran 6 underground from that transformer into the gear. And they went, oh crap, 500's only listed for this and the city wants 7 sets. So they trenched and they bored in the side of the building and they ran a live set or a line side set through the fused sections of gear, busted their red plate out and ran it all the way over. So there's a ton of code violations, opened a big can of worms, and stuff had to get fixed. None of which contributed to my my accident, but it was just one more thing on that list of costs. Legal fees, you look at our company, the hotel, GE had their legal team involved, the original installer, work comp, and OSHA. When something like this happens, if somebody's in a coma in the hospital, everybody positions like it's going to be a death, right? Because you have to. You have to dot every I, cross every T. So you can't imagine the legal fees. Insurance premiums, that's a big deal. You guys don't see that. You might see it as it's passed down in the lack of no money to give raises or bonuses that year if you have insurance premiums. The big one is loss of trust. Future work, contracts, if you have businesses that you work for constantly, you could lose that business. We're going to talk about that downtime in a second. Bottom line is $5 is spent for every dollar of medical expense. That puts my accident around $1.2 million for a 14% burn. That's it, 14%, $1.2 million. Put me out of work for 7 months. I rushed back at 7 months. Now, that downtime, loss of job site production. If you're on big projects and something happens, you're going to lose a lot of production, not just in a production facility. If you blow up a bus duct and the line's down, although that's going to do it. A couple examples from Kansas City. Dakota O'Sullivan, 25-year-old sheetrock installer. Back in 2019, he decided to jump out of the 18-story window in the downtown building they were putting together, a high-rise. Obviously, he died. He landed right next to a bunch of people, right? That job site shut down, right? There's going to be an investigation, not to mention the massive amount of PTSD that's going to cause those other employees on that job site. Some people will not go back to that job site because of that trauma. As human beings, we're not meant to see some things That's one of them. Now, Jubal Hubbard, he's a pipe fitter, first-year pipe fitter, 28 years old. To back up a little bit, so when I was doing VDC BIM, the pre-construction stuff, CAD work, coordination, all that, I worked on a Garmin job out in Kansas City. I know everybody's heard of Garmin. They had a 2-part upgrade in their building. So they did a $100 million upgrade, and then I was part of the second part, the second phase of it. In the first phase, Jubal, since he was a first-year pipe fitter, he was not qualified, and he was removing a cap off of a pipe that was pressurized, didn't realize it came off and killed him, nearly took his head off. That job shut down. That's a $100 million project. You got 1,000 people on the job site now that are out of work. Some of them are going to need counseling. It's bad, right? You don't want to just not get hurt for yourself. You want to not do that to your employees or your peers or whoever. So incident energy, I'm just going to briefly touch on this. Calories, frequently it's misunderstood. So what is a calorie? Incident energy is the amount of energy impressed on a surface a certain distance from the source generated during an electrical arc event. Incident energy is measured in calories. 1 calorie is the amount of energy needed to raise a centimeter cube of water 1 degrees. Now, what in the heck does that mean? If you were to take a disposable lighter, put the hottest part of the flame underneath your palm for a second, that's going to be a 1.2 calorie second degree burn. Now, second degree burns are often thought that they're pretty lightweight, pretty common. You know, you could have a second degree sunburn with some blistering. That's a minor second degree burn. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a burn that if you get it on your hands, your face, any private areas, your feet, or is more than 3 square inches, it's going to require you to go get at least outpatient treatment for that. And if it's a little bit bigger, it's going to require some inpatient, right? IV antibiotics, to keep you from getting massive infection. It is a big open wound. It's a serious deal. It's like putting 130 to 160 lighters around your hand. It's a tremendous amount of heat. So what it is your first degree burn, which is usually a sunburn. I was more in this area in the deep second degree burn on the palms of my face. And then I was a deep third degree burn because it had burned some of my veins out. You couldn't see my veins anymore. They all reformed. The human body is pretty amazing. And now there's a 4th degree burn, which typically is going to require amputation. That's a bone and marrow burn. A 1.2 calorie second degree burn looks like that, right? That is a serious burn. That is a burn that's going to require you to spend a little bit of time in the hospital. It's going to keep you, it's going to, limit your movement for a while. It's a mess. Now, you guys touched on this earlier. I'm just going to reiterate that again because there's a lot of misconceptions about this. This is a 7E. The arc flash boundary shall be the distance at which the incident energy equals a second degree burn, right? So you guys touched on it. You don't want people standing there looking at you when you're doing your job, right? Because if your boss is standing there or a company boss is standing there in their Under Armour shirt and you blow it up, that person's going to go to the hospital with their shirt melted to them, second degree burns on their arms, possible lung inhalation, damage. It could be a fatality. I mean, it is a serious burn to be standing at the barricade. And that is so misunderstood that even at an IEEE conference I was at last year, one of the engineers said something about, I just tell my people they need to stay right outside that boundary. And I'm like, no, that's completely inaccurate. If you can get people completely out of the area, that's even better. Just get them out of your area. A couple things that people say to me, because I'll go do site assessments. And I'll say, well, what PPE do you have? What are you guys wearing? Well, we don't work anything hot. Bullshit. So, or we don't work anything big, right? And those two things really annoy me. Here's a 30 amp disconnect. Now, you may or may not have seen this video. A lot of these online videos were done by my boss, Scott Margolin, who's my direct report. Best boss ever, right? So when he was with Westex and now with Tyndale, he did a lot of these. This is just a 30 amp disconnect, right? That's it, 30 amp disconnect, 2 cycles. That's 1/30th of a second. You're not getting out of the way. And it's about as small of an arc flash as you'd ever see for something like this.
This is a 30 amp disconnect, and it's going to be faulted at 480 volts. If this arc does not sustain, you'll notice that one of the wires jumps the lug 2 cycles into the arc. So we're limited to 2 cycles. And when we take a look at this in slow motion, we get an outstanding look at the hazard that even that small an arc, a very brief duration, and that small piece of equipment can pose. You see that the arc is out 5 feet, and there's a significant volume of molten copper from much greater distances than that.
So remember that molten metal is 1900 to 2500 degrees. It will ignite your clothing if it's not PPE. But what I wanted to focus on is I freeze frame that. Now I talked a little bit about barricades, boundaries, that kind of stuff. So a 30 amp 480 volt disconnect like that goes 2 cycles, probably going to have about a 3-foot arc flash boundary. So where are you going to set up your physical barricade? 42 inches, right? That's where it's called for. So where is 42 inches? It's right there. So if somebody's standing there, now albeit it's at 1/30th of a second, but if you're standing there at that 1/30th of a second, you're gonna get burned, right? I mean, it's clear. You're gonna be standing right in the middle of the red hot fireball. So let's get into the root cause. What is the root cause? Plain and simple, man, it was complacency. Complacency, the actual definition, is self-satisfaction, especially when accompanied by an unawareness of actual dangers and deficiencies. So you literally are unaware of the dangers. You used to be aware, now you're not aware, right? You're just going about your business, and these things are right here. Some synonyms to that: big-headedness, conceited, proud, smug, self-important, egotistical, arrogant, right? You think, I thought, I'm smarter than this hazard. I can do this. I've done this a million times. So complacency came in when my boss said, just be careful, right? My boss, I worked for him for 20 years. He loved me like a second son. He didn't tell me to just be careful because he was worried about the bottom line, right? Or that he didn't care about my safety or any of that stuff. He was just as complacent as I was. He had his best guy on the job, right? Best guy on the job. Never had an accident. Was technically sound. So his second to the last domino was saying, just be careful, right? He was complacent as well. So it's not just you out in the field that can be complacent. It can easily be management because you haven't had any recordables, right? Now, when you go out there and you make a decision to not wear your PPE, right? You're on a big job site. You're in front of this panel. All you got to do is pull a breaker out or stab one in or whatever you got to do. I'm sure you can think of a task pretty easily. And your PPE is 2 miles away in the parking lot or in your job trailer, whatever. You get it. It's hot. You know it's only going to take you a second. You decide to cut that corner and not wear your PPE. Of course it's easier. Of course it's cooler and faster, more efficient, right? 99.9% of the time you're going to survive it, right? Nothing's going to happen at all. But just like a mouse that learns how to jump a wall to get that cheese, you have now trained your brain that whenever you come up to that situation again, subconsciously, if not consciously, you're going to say to yourself, man, I've always done it that way, right? And you just trained yourself that that's okay. The problem with this is, as human beings, we don't keep jumping off 25-foot cliffs. We go to a 50, we go to 75, we go to 100, and then we go to 125 and die. You are going to push the envelope. Human beings do that. When you survive, you go a little bit further every single time. Now, Shakespeare said, your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. My opinion is that electricians are the best, most trained, most technical workforce on the planet. I'm partial, of course, but I look at the other trades and the stuff that I've done, and I don't see that same level, the technical level that you guys see, right? Every day in your jobs. So, but that breeds a level of arrogance that, a level of complacency. It borders on arrogance. And don't get me wrong, there's always going to be that it ain't bragging if you can back it up mentality with construction in general, but especially the electrical side of things. And that's okay if it doesn't affect your choices to be safe. Some of you, maybe all of you, heard about a guy getting arc flashed at a Google data center up in Iowa a couple of years ago, year and a half ago. So some of my field engineers sent me that story on my phone, and I know that project. I helped build the Google data center in Nebraska or in Omaha, and that was the same crew. So I was like, holy crap, I started making phone calls, and I knew the guy. I knew the guy personally. I worked with him. He was a general foreman on there, and he was a cowboy, right? He was a sharp guy, well over 10 years in the field, got shit done. He just didn't do it safely, right? And the problem is that you not only have to look out for yourself, but just like a drunk driver that hits a family and survives, you may blow something up and kill other people, right? And so it just so happened that he had 2 other guys behind him, and those guys also got injured. They had the life flight, 1 or 2 of them. Now, thankfully, they all survived, and the one that got it worse, I'm not sure if he's back to 100%, but he's back to work. But you can imagine the trauma, the company trauma. When someone gets hurt at work, I mean, you guys talked about it earlier, and you've got to respond to that. It is emotional, man, and there's no shame. And when you know somebody that you care about in your workforce and they get hurt, it's going to tear you up. There's no problem. It's going to tear you up. Now, a few of the complacency statements that I've seen, that I've kind of just heard over the years, we've always done it that way. So Mario Puzo in The Godfather, Michael Corleone, says accidents don't happen to people who take accidents as a personal insult. You got to be personally invested in your safety and other people's safety, right? See something, say something. I heard that earlier, which I love. I get pissed when I read a story about an electrician getting arc flashed. The latest one I posted on LinkedIn, an electrician in Home Depot, right? Working in that gear. I've been in those gear rooms a bunch at Home Depot, and it blew up. It blew him up. I don't know what his condition is, but it pisses me off because that guy obviously wasn't qualified. He didn't have the right PPE on. This stuff is completely 100% preventable. The explosions are not preventable. Mostly they are, but not always. But you getting hurt is always preventable. You got to put on your PPE. I've done this a million times. How many times have you heard that? So here's Richard Lee Winkle, 83 years old, stabbing a bus duct disconnect at a plant that he worked as a maintenance electrician, part-time. He'd been there forever. Blew up on him. He died the next day on his birthday at 84. You cannot tell me that that guy had not done that a million times, right? It's going to get you. It's going to catch up to you. Don't keep thinking you're invincible. I don't need PPE. I'm just going to, and you can fill in the blank. Here's a couple of great examples. Any of the old school guys in here will probably know what I'm talking about, but old breaker panel covers, certain brands, used to have these stupid arms that held the panel cover to the tub. And you'd loosen the screws and the arms would push back, and then you turn a washer and the arms would turn so you could pull the cover off. We hated them because they would pinch wires in there in the tub, or the washer would disengage from the arm and it wouldn't cinch the cover down, or they'd fall off. And so there's one of those clips right there, fell off laying on C-phase. Now, here you are, that plant electrician or just an electrician working at somebody's plant. I don't need PPE. I'm just going to pull the panel cover off to see what kind of breakers are in there. I'm not even going to do any work. I'm not putting a tool in there. I'm just going to pull the cover off because I need to get some model numbers off these breakers. That thing touches ground, which is the most common arc flash, is hot to ground that starts all three phases in. Now you're on firehead's toe because you didn't put your PPE on or do your risk assessments. You guys are talking about IR stuff. I'll probably let you talk about that, but that is a gray area, man. You got to have PPE to take the covers off, no doubt. And if you don't have the proper PPE to take the cover off, you can't take the cover off. Frequently, plants will have electricians come in and pull the cover off, and then they'll have an IR guy do the IR scan. And that guy in the IR scan has a little bit more freedom because he's not removing panel covers. But anyway, that's one example. And then my field engineers at my last company sent me that. I was so fixated on that dead lizard, I didn't even see the live lizard on the left. But here's that 30 amp disconnect, right? I'm not going to do anything. I just need to see what kind of fuses are in there because I need to order some new fuses. I don't need PPE. Well, you've seen what a 30 amp disconnect can do, right? So you blow it up. Maybe you're not on fire head to toe. Maybe you just lose an eyeball, right? Because you don't have your safety glasses on. That thing scurries across there, causes an arc flash. You just don't know. You don't know what's inside a panel. Even if you rub your hand on the top of a panel, there's just stuff you just don't know without taking the cover off. And to remove a bolted cover requires PPE if it requires PPE. If it's over 1.2 calories, it's going to require it. This is a good one, especially on the union side. Don't tell me how to do my job. I've been doing this for 20 years. You don't know what you're talking about, pup. So here's a great graphic. From 2017 to 2021, 18 to 34-year-olds, there was 6,167 injuries or fatalities. When we look at the different age group, 45 and up, we go up to 14,000. There's a reason for that. It's because the old guys like me say, you know, all those things I just said. I've done this a million times. It's only going to take a second. All right, there's another one. It's only going to take a second. So this guy's a 40s. He's in the Conga. It's not here. Often videos that you see online are from other countries. Not because it doesn't happen in America, it's just we live in such a litigious society that any video that's ever captured from an accident is immediately sealed up in court and with prejudice. You're never going to see it. It's sealed, right? So this is in the Conga guy, no PPE, working on around 380 volts, I think is what it is out there. Now that was only 2 seconds, right? And he gets up. You have that golden hour that I talked about. He died a couple days later, did not survive those injuries. Fractions of seconds matter. It can mean the difference between life and death. We've made it this far without any recordables, right? The absence of accidents doesn't mean the presence of safety. You have to constantly audit, right? And then I love that you guys were talking about that get shit done. But you got to do it safely, right? I'm glad they added that word on there because that's exactly what I thought too was get shit done just means, okay, I'm going to bust in there and do it because that's kind of how I operated. And that's the reason I got hurt is because that's the way I operated. So I'd hate to not leave you with some solutions. So what are some solutions to this? Pre-job planning, tailgate meetings, toolbox talks, JHAs, risk assessments, energized work permits, etc. Talk about it, right? Have somebody there with you. I don't talk about it. I don't have a slide in here. I took it out. But, you know, if you're working on something that's risky, you need to have somebody with you. And you need to talk about it before you get in there. You fill all that and you have a game plan. Seconds matter. If something blows up in your face, what's the first thing you're going to do? Bah, I'm on fire, right? You're not going to think straight. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. You need to have somebody there with a fire extinguisher that can put you out if you're on fire. Just 1 second means the difference between life and death or having a life that's worth living or not worth living, right? Plan ahead. Now, I'm a PPE guy, right? I switched jobs. I just started working with Tyndale about 6 months ago because it was an offer I couldn't refuse. Best mission, vision, passion I've ever seen in the industry. We sell PPE. That's what we do. We protect you. We sell the stuff that protects you. Now, one thing that I still have a hard time getting on board is the hierarchy of risk controls, you know, where the last thing on the thing is PPE. I don't see it that way, man, because you guys kind of talked about an electrically safe work condition. To get to that point, you have to wear PPE. So elimination, yeah, you got to turn it off for elimination, which is your number one, but you got to have PPE on to check it dead, live. You have to, there's no way around it. So that PPE is kind of intertwined between all those. But one thing's for certain, if you have your PPE on, you're not going to end up with a coat like that, which was mine, right? One of the miracles, like I said, of several that kept me alive was that polyester nylon red cap jacket didn't fully ignite. It should have. Herzig Engineering, good friends of mine out in Kansas City, fantastic engineers. I had them run my study, right? Because I obsessed about it. I know every last detail of that gear, the distance, the wire size, type, fuse type, all that stuff. 37.5 calories. I didn't have a stitch of PPE, nothing, no safety glasses, zero, because that's the level of complacency I reached. Now, to be fair, back in 2009, a 40 cal suit was a unicorn, right? They were telling you couldn't survive a 40 cal suit. One thing that was said a little bit earlier is arc flash, in my experience, and I've literally blown stuff up personally at Chemo Labs, it never pushes a mannequin over. We put mannequins in front of it, right in front of it. That doesn't have enough force to even push the mannequin over. Some giant arc flashes I've seen roll a roller cart, but generally it's not going to punch metal through you or collapse your lungs or break ribs or any of that crap. Now, you definitely can get blown back a little bit and have some other damage. But I should have had a 40 cal suit. Now, it never reached 37.5 calories because if it had, it would have killed me. One of the miracles that kept me alive was a primary A-phase fuse blew in the transformer. Now that's, if you know about that, that's very unusual because they overdrive the crap out of those transformers so that never happens, right? They'll put a smaller transformer and as big a fuse in there as they can and just let it melt down. They'll just replace it. So it blew the A-phase fuse and stopped that arc short of that 37.5 calories. Otherwise, it would have killed me. You got to have some near miss and close call reporting. Now, I get that snitches get stitches, but you got to figure out how you're going to take care of stuff that keeps happening, right? You get what you inspect, not what you expect. you've got to go out there and you've got to report these things. Because like I said, that row of dominoes, if you can pull one of these dominoes out of the middle of somebody's string by near miss and close call reporting, you may save their life. And like I said a minute ago, you may save other people's lives. That person may survive unscathed. They may energize something that blows up downstream and kills someone else. These are just the NFPA. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you've got to do field work audits, training updates. You've got NFPA 70E training you got to do every 3 years. 5 years on your labels. Now the why, because I always have to have the why so I can understand. The reason those arc flash labels get changed every 5 years is because the IEEE 1584 is a document that does the calculations for those, changes every 5 years. It updates, right? So this last update, the numbers went down. So a lot of the big numbers just went down a little bit, but in the case where you have the 480 branch panel transformer 12208, they went down substantially enough that I questioned some of them when I did an update, a 5-year update. So the 1584 is what determines those 5-year updates. So you don't know if a label's out of date. You don't know. That's not accurate information, right? So you're already behind the 8 ball on knowing what's right to put on, because that label may not conform, because we learn stuff, right? May not conform to the new update. Anytime you get new people, new training, you got to keep that current as needed. Now, you guys talked a little bit about qualified. The 70E definition is one who has demonstrated skills and knowledge related to construction and the operation of electrical equipment and installations, and has received safety training to identify hazards and reduce the risk, right? There's a lot to that. I've probably worked in every aspect of this industry, and I spent a lot of time troubleshooting heavy machinery, right? Working on, assembly lines and that kind of stuff. So I probably had every little part and piece in my hand that assembles in one of those things. But I would be completely unqualified to step foot on somebody's property without some training, right? Filling me in on the hazards. What are the energies around here? What does this machine do? Being qualified, to be clear, you can train a monkey to be qualified. No joke. If you're just stamping out widgets and there's electrical hazard here, you can train a complete novice, not an electrician, to reset motor starters or whatever in this one thing if you train and document. You don't have to be an electrician to be qualified, right? Competent is the next level. You got qualified and then you got competent. Competent's a superstar, does a lot more stuff, right? So qualification really requires, like, I couldn't walk out on any of your job sites and be qualified, even though I've got a long pedigree, right? There's things that I need to know to make me qualified. Now, why is that important? So here's a scenario. I was doing a site assessment out here, and most, if not all of you, understand this gear setup here. You've got a medium voltage switch, right? This feeds this transformer. I think it was a 2000 kVA. Came out and feed a 277/480, 4,000 amp piece of gear, right? Pretty common setup. Sometimes it's inside, whatever. So the first thing, I'm a sticker snob because, like I said, it's the most important information that you need to know before getting into a panel. So I look at this label right here, okay? And by the way, this medium voltage cabinet, no lock on it. Unlocked, you can just crack it open. No fence around this building, you can get right into it. Well, the first thing I notice is this category 0. Well, that tells me a couple things. It tells me, number one, the sticker's old because we don't have cat 0. And number two, it tells me it's wrong. There is no way that medium voltage switch is a cat 0. That's like wearing a bathing suit, right? Maybe a cat 1, probably a cat 2, no way a cat 0. So I already know that sticker's wrong. So then I'm looking at it and I look, 3/25/2011. So that sticker's old, right? It's 8 years expired, right? That sticker's not right. So here's the scenario you can play out in your mind. You're a maintenance electrician or whatever, you're in a plant, you got your new guy with you, not stupid, but ignorant of the hazards, and a machine's down. Everybody's panicking, everybody's yelling at you, we got to get this going back, we're not able to stamp out widgets, and whatever. So everybody's leaning on you, you're stressed out, right? And a lot of times you're going to generally forego your paperwork because you're just wanting to get the job done, everybody's yelling at you. Don't relax on your paperwork. Do it every time. So you tell your new guy, you're missing a leg. You find out you're missing a leg of power, and you tell your new guy, hey, I need you to run outside, go out to that gear, because we're missing a leg. I need you to see if a breaker's partially tripped, or what's going on. You smell anything burning? Just do some basic troubleshooting, and then here, call me on the radio when you get out there and figure something out. The new guy who's young doesn't want to ask any questions because the old guy's pissy and grouchy, and the new guy doesn't want to look stupid. So he goes out there and he's standing right there where I took that picture. And he says, okay, I've got some troubleshooting skills. I need to start at the top and work my way down, right? That's how everybody's taught to troubleshoot. So let me go over here. So he goes over, this looks like the top. So go over to that medium voltage switch. He's reading his label, cat 0, so I'm good with my close, 1.2 cal, 480 volts when the cover's open. So I got my fluke meter. I'm good to go there. I'm industrial, so I've got nobody's around, so I can relax a little bit on my boundaries. And he takes his fluke meter to test voltage in that cabinet. What's going to happen? Right? It's going to be a depth investigation. Maybe survive, I don't know. But it's going to shut the whole plant down. So you're telling me that this sticker that got put on there 13 years ago-ish, in 13 years, there wasn't one qualified person in that factory that could look at that sticker and say, wait, if you ever look at something and you go, I don't know about that, do something about it, right? Worst case scenario, you're wrong. Best case scenario, you save somebody's life, right? So that's a perfect example of being qualified. You need to always be looking around for stuff. See something, say something. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up with this. So if you believe in miracles, great. If you don't, I don't care. This is my story, and I do. So I'm going to tell it how I want to. As long as I can remember, my mom has got up in the morning and read her Bible and journaled, right? And she'll spend an hour or whatever, and she's got years of journals. She'll always write in black whatever notes she wants to write down about what she's read in the Bible or whatever else. And then she'll always write in red what God showed her to pray about, whatever it is, right? So she drew this, right? Red. God showed her this. Explosion. If you're going to draw an arc flash, could you do it any better than that, right? It's an explosion with bits of metal coming out and all that stuff. Now, she wrote that 3/26. 11 days later, I got blown up, right? So that's how I get my mission, vision, passion, right? There is a lot of things that have happened. There's a lot of miracles I didn't even go over. They're indisputable. They kept me alive. And so that's how I get my passion and mission and my vision, right? You got to lock on to something that makes you excited about what you do. That's my mission statement. It's tattooed on my arm right there. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. That's in Genesis 50:20 and my accident date of April 7, 2009. I believe that God saved my life because someone else has something more important to do than me, and maybe I can be a part of saving their lives. What you do as safety individuals and looking out for other people, what I do literally saves lives, right? Literally. That's all I got. Before I go, if you haven't seen it, this isn't a plug. I mean, I'm not a sales guy, but if you haven't seen it, Tyndale does Arc Week every year, concurrent with Shark Week, right? So this year we got 3 Arc Flash survivors. Me, Brandon Schrader, which some or most of you have heard, and then you got Brandon Fireball Smith. Now, all 3 of us substantially and catastrophically burned long term, right? I was a complacent guy, right? I already told you my story. Brandon told you his story. It's the 5 o'clock on Friday. I'm going to get the job done. I don't have my PPE with me, so I'm going to take some chances. Brandon Smith was the 2-year guy that shouldn't have been doing what he's doing. He wasn't qualified and got in there. He was 42% burned. Watch those videos. They're free on Tyndale. Lots of resources on there as well. My contact information is there. I'm accessible, man. If you want to send me a text, look me up on LinkedIn. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. I post probably 2-3 posts on LinkedIn, and that's it. I'm not on any other social media, but I post a lot of safety stuff on there. So I appreciate you sitting through it. Looks like I got you out right on time, too. So thank you.